I'll say I'm quite creatively driven in other ways that don't just relate to the filmmaking. So I'd say I'm very inspired by I'm very inspired by nature, I'm very inspired by my art and everything like that, and I use that in my filmmaking, and that's what I really enjoy about it. Um, I believe that any kind of story or genre has the power to change or mould or represent any of the people watching, no matter how small or unconventional it is. I believe that is the beauty about filmmaking and creating in general. And I feel with some worries about the industry in the future, with restricting certain types of creativity, I feel like that goes against like the whole point of being creative. But if you get that chance, I feel like that's really important and really good. I grew up not. I've always loved film, but writing was my big thing growing up. But that sort of led into filmmaking because I've always enjoyed making my own stories and my own characters, my own worlds. But I could only do that through writing. I wasn't very good at art when I was younger either. But it was when I got older and I realised I was like, oh, I can do this now. I can learn how to do this. And then that's when I was like, wow, I've got all these new openings for different kinds of like creative things like filmmaking and writing and art. And I realised that filmmaking's a really good one because it incorporates all those things. So filmmaking, you can incorporate art and you can incorporate writing into it. And that's what I really like about it. It's so like multifaceted. And I like films in general. I grew up. I used to rewatch the same films a lot for a while. Like I used to like play them on repeat on my DVDs and stuff, and take them on car journeys with my little DVD player and everything. But I remember what I used to do was I used to like going into the special features and learn the behind the scenes and everything like that. Especially with like stop motion movies, I really liked. I love seeing the process behind the scenes. I'd often like that more than watching the actual film. Was seeing the people behind the scenes work with the models and the actors and everything behind it. And I think that's when my love first started, because I was like, right, I really love seeing what happens behind the scenes. How do I get behind the scenes and doing that kind of stuff? Yeah, well, with this course, it's quite difficult because it's been so um, helpful, the course, in showing me different types of filmmakers you can do. I've sort of enjoyed everything. So at the moment, I don't have a really specific route to go down in filmmaking just because I've done so much of it. I like so many different parts of it. But right now, I'll be looking. I'm probably not looking at like a main director role right now or anything like that. I think that's something that people try to get straight into, but that's something only that comes a bit later. You can't really, unless you're very lucky, that's not what you're going to go into. So I'd rather I think work behind the scenes on certain projects, like ideally ones that are like-minded and stuff I'd be interested in. But I don't mind working on projects and roles of just anything really. I enjoy just the creative process of just being around everyone and working together on a big project with people, and that's good enough for me. Oh, definitely film. I think like definitely short film specifically. I don't think I've ever made anything yet that hits the hour mark at all. I prefer short term. Sorry, I prefer short form storytelling. I believe a good film told in less time is better than a bad film that takes like 2 hours to tell. And I believe if something's a bit shorter, then you can have like sometimes I think restrictions are good. Like creative restrictions, not so, but I think sometimes time restrictions, saying like, right, you got this amount of time and you got this amount of deadline to produce this, I think that can get the best out of you, because you're like not spending ages trying to be like, oh, what should I do? When you're given a deadline, you can be like, right, I need to do it now and stuff like that. And I think that'd be really helpful. I like the deadline of being like, right, how can you tell a good story in this amount of time? And I feel like I think I like the task of that. I think, and I prefer working in short form. Like I've made like 2 minute little shorts. I've made like the longest film I made so far is about 23 minutes, and I'd like to go longer. I think some of my favorite films are like 3 hours, and I think if you've got a good story to tell in 3 hours, then you should. But I don't think you should, just because the industry standard is an hour and a half, you should aim for that. You can tell a good story in 10 minutes, and I don't think you should restrict yourself on that. Oh, I think at the moment, I like to consider myself working in various genres and styles, but I've definitely seen a theme of I like exploring the thin line between sort of reality and fiction, and often how the two blend together, and sort of deconstruction of real life and everything like that. So I'll often have a lot of my films are set within a realistic setting, but there'll just be something slightly fantastical about it, like certain characters, and just because that's the way I've always noticed like tiny little things in life, and I just found them really interesting. I just thought, why don't you explore those and stuff like that, instead of like disregarding it as like, oh, that's not real or that's fake. What if you're in a world where this thing is real and stuff? How would you handle that, and how would that affect you? I just found that really interesting. Another theme would be transformations. So I notice in a lot of my films, a character has to go through something or a type of transformation. Sometimes it's a physical transformation, but sometimes it can just be like a change of heart or a change of character and stuff. And I think that's quite a big theme in my work. That's a hard question. I think I'm always quite scared of changing and scared of changes happening in the world. I like being comfortable with what I have and everything like that. So, but when changes do happen, I do think sometimes you just got to suck it up and deal with it. So that's why I have it in with a lot of my characters, because it's sort of me being like trying to deal with change and stuff with other characters and stuff. And it's like, what if it's not going to be bad? What if it's going to be okay and stuff, even if it's like bad for a long time? Oh, so I love everything, but I think specific genres, horror's definitely one of them, because I don't think a lot of people realise how versatile horror can be. Like, I think people only see horror as like one type of thing just because of like what the big horror films that are released in the cinema are. But I think horror films, they can be beautiful, they can be emotional, they can be sad, they can be funny, and that can all be within the horror genre. And I think it has that over a lot of other genres, you know, rather than just a comedy or just a thriller. You know, a horror can be a comedy thriller at the same time. I think exploring what scares us as well is really good. I think a lot of people don't like doing that, and I think horror can do it in so many different ways. Like, horror can do it in a way that's like, it could be funny, it can be scary at the same time. My favourite types of horror films are the ones that are funny and generally terrifying at the same time. So I think that's what I think horror specifically I really love the most. I always go to David Lynch as my first one, only because his styles of film, I really like how, I don't think people realise how versatile he is as a filmmaker. So he can make a film like Eraserhead, which is like a really strange sort of non-linear exploration of sort of America and industrial environments and relationships between men and women and children. And then he can make something like Straight Story, which is about a guy who like drives a tractor across the country, and that's all it is, and it's quite nice. Or he can make something like Elephant Man, which is like a real life biopic, the film about John Merrick and his life. So I think the fact that David Lynch can do all these different styles is really interesting. But I do think he has a style across his work that's quite obvious. So sort of like he explores otherness and stuff, and the deconstruction of reality often. He has, like, how I like exploring in my films. I like the realistic settings. He has a lot of stuff set in, but with just something slightly off, like certain characters or certain things, and then it'll sort of like deconstruct around him and sort of fall apart as the film goes on. It'll start off fairly straight, and then the rest of the film will sort of delve in deeper and deeper into something slightly more sinister. But I've always liked how his films follow like, no matter how weird his films are, they often, you know, goodness always prevails. It's weird. So you can have like the most bizarre and disgusting characters in it, but they'll always like die in the end, or they'll always vanish, and like the good guys win, even if it's like not conventional. It's really hard to describe, but that's how I view his films. For Project 3, I went back to a script I'd made in the first year, which was the film's called Straw. It's about a woman called Lily who decides to make a scarecrow. She lives isolated on this farm. You know, her husband's dead, her daughter moved away, they had a really nasty argument, so she goes and puts this scarecrow out in the field. It's made of her late husband's old clothes, and she's surprised when that evening she hears a knock at her door and the scarecrow's alive and standing in front of her. So the film's sort of about her dealing with this scarecrow that's now in her house, this living scarecrow, and then working together, and sort of her dealing with her grief for her daughter and her husband through this scarecrow that's now living in her house. It's a film that sort of explores, as I just said, grief, but also healing from it as well, healing from grief, and also sort of dealing with your own anger and your own issues through it, because the scarecrow acts as a vessel, not only to represent her husband, but also her daughter, which she had sort of a nasty argument with. And now that it's in her house, she's forced to confront these two huge elements and that have really been affecting her life, that she's refused to acknowledge until now, when it's like standing right in front of her and the problem's unavoidable, and that's what the scarecrow is supposed to represent. This is the first time in the past 2 years where I properly said, right, I needed help on this film, I would like to get a group together, and thankfully a lot of people in my class came forward and said, right, we can do it, we can help you, and I really appreciated that. One of the problems that we ran into was after I'd put the casting call out and got the actors together and we were all set to film on this certain date, and I'd chatted to the actors and they were like, we're all fine, we're all ready. One actor said, the actor who was playing the Scarecrow in that film said, I can't do it, I can't do that day. This was like the night before, so I was really stressed, but I said, no, let me take my time, I'm going to sort this out. So I went in my group chat and I just said, look, can anybody fill in that role? And thankfully somebody did. And that was a problem. That would have been a problem I probably wouldn't have been able to deal with probably a year prior. I probably would have been too panicked and been like, right, the whole film's over. It's all going to mess. But this year I was able to say like, right, here's how I deal with it. Here's how we move on. Let's keep going. You know, we're not stopping. We're going to keep going. I feel like I've become more mature in that sense. I've matured in terms of the fact that I can handle a production. I can handle a film when something goes wrong. But other than that, it was quite smooth filming. You know, not a lot of things went wrong apart from the fact that I had to be generous with cutting certain scenes. Despite it being a short film, there were just some scenes where we're just like, right, we need to get this actor home. We don't want to have to be filming too late. Let's just cut this scene down. We don't need this certain scene. We don't need this unneeded scene where they walk up the stairs and talk and stuff like that because it doesn't add anything. So I got used to being like, right, we stop here, we stop there. And when people were like, oh, Morgan, can we just like redo that scene? I had to be like, nope, we're done, we're here, you know, we can't have it too late, we've got to keep going. So that really helped me in a directing sense. Definitely, if there was a film in the second year that I worked on with a friend, which was like an animated film, he wrote and storyboarded it and he wanted me to do the animation for it. It was a film called Share Me, which is about the real life story of a little war pigeon. And that was important just because it got like a really positive reception when we were showing people, and the support from that gave me the boost to sort of be like, right, I can keep going, I can keep filming, I can keep making films and making stuff because it's like, well, people enjoy it. So that's really good to see. And another film that really was important was my most recent film I made, so Straw for Project 3. That one specifically because it was me taking an old idea and renewing it to fit sort of like my current interests and my current to represent how I've developed as a filmmaker. And it's also my last year. It's also the last film I'm making of this year, so that's also why it's important, because it's supposed to like represent like everything, the entire point of me coming here and all of it encompassed into this one film at the end, and I'm pretty proud of it. Oh, there's quite a few. German Expressionism I always point to because I've always liked how they, their themes of sort of reality and how it represents like the time that came out. So German Expressionism specifically was sort of coming, like bordering on the start of like war and Nazism in the country, and sort of that changing environment was reflected in their filmmaking. So the world was sort of crooked and sort of stark and dark, and like, so the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari is one of them because, like I said, the set is deliberately constructed with like impossible angles and sharp points because that's supposed to be like, that's how everyone in the country was sort of feeling at that time. Everything was wrong, everything was wonky, everything was unsettling. While I don't have anything like that dire in my films, I do like having an environment constructed around like how certain characters are feeling and how certain characters view the world. So in my Project 3 film, I deliberately colour corrected the outside to be sort of colder than the inside. So the inside I deliberately like made very yellow, very warm, because I wanted it to feel like, oh, you're coming into the house, it's like you're coming into a family home, family heart and stuff like that. So the inside the house deliberately looks a bit smaller and a bit cosier. And the outside, I got these big, like, huge wide shots outside for when she's like putting the scarecrow up, and it's supposed to be like, oh, big world, and it's just them in it. You know, you don't deliberately. I've shot the film so you don't see any other characters in it, even if there's other people walking around. I deliberately said no, just focus on these two. There's also a bit of scaling in the film. So in a lot of films with like German Expressionism influences, they have sort of like they'll skew the environment and the camera to make something bigger than it actually is, and sort of like distort the sizing. I've done that a little bit in my film because the two actors are not that much different in height, but I wanted the scarecrow to look like unhuman and sort of slightly more impossible to look at and sort of more strange. So some bits in the film where he looks like absolutely massive, and that's just the way we shot it, just to make it deliberately look more inhuman. Soviet montage definitely as well. So sort of how one scene can link to, like, how if you're shown something it can elicit this kind of emotion from you. So I did that specifically with, I was timing with what, like, sort of like a rhythmic montage style. I timed the music to a scene where a character's like making something and crafting something, and that sort of gave it this quite like soft and made it quite melancholic in a way, the fact that she was like doing it to the music as if the music was actually playing, even though obviously the character can't hear it. But I wanted sort of it to feel sort of like nice and relaxed, nice, like the creation of something. And there's a few montages in my film, so I was really big on musical montages in my film. So there's about 3 in total. Just because I believe music and there's not a lot of talking in my film, so I'm really inspired by films that like they were put under the limitation of not being able to use sound in it. But in mine, I could use a lot of sound, but I deliberately didn't, because I think a lot of storytelling can be done without words and just time to the music, and I think that can be slightly more powerful than just like sitting there and talking to each other back and forth. And so I've tried to put that in my film.
Lovely.
I would say don't think, the deadline is the day you have to hand it in. I would say just like give yourself self-imposed deadlines. Be like, right, I want to start it now and I want to finish this certain thing now, and try to stick to that best you can. It's okay if you can't, because it won't be the actual deadline, but just like do your own self-imposed deadlines, like, right, I'm going to start writing this over Christmas, and then after Christmas it'll be all ready for me to go film and everything like that. I would say that's really important, just to give yourself self-imposed deadlines. And also don't be afraid to look for other people for help. So if you're really struggling with something, don't be afraid to come to people in your class saying, look, I need help with this, I need help exporting this, I need help on how this looks. Because you can feel a bit like, oh, I'm not being able to do it myself, I'm really rubbish. But I think collaboration is a huge part of filmmaking that I think people need to realise that it's like good and it's okay to ask your friends, and working on something together can be like, if you're all like-minded individuals and you're enjoying what you're working on, then it's really rewarding.